Hello, everybody. Welcome to Mindful Metal Jacket. I said that very dramatically. This is Joe List, and I appreciate you listening. Thanks for being here. Hope you enjoy the show. I hope you've been enjoying the show. Or maybe this is your first time. I don't know. Perhaps you always thought about it and were like, fine, I'll give it a shot. Or perhaps someone recommended it, whatever it is, however you got here. Maybe you've been here since the beginning. That could be possible. Probably a bunch of you, I imagine. Jacketeers. I don't know. I just made that up. Maybe that's something. I appreciate you being here, however you got here. Today, I have my friend Doug Smith on. Do you guys know Doug? He's a comedian, wonderful guy. And I think this might be my favorite episode ever. It was such a great conversation. I enjoyed the hell out of it. We didn't even get into a lot of the stuff he thought we might, and I thought we might, but the conversation flew by. Doug is an old friend of mine. We used to be drinking buddies back in the day, and he hasn't drank for over a year. He'll talk about that, and I haven't drank in 8 years. I talk about that a lot, I guess, but man, it was great. It was a great conversation, and his sound sucks because I don't know why. I guess he doesn't have a microphone. He doesn't have the setup. I didn't want to bust his balls, but if he hears this now, he'll feel terrible. But he just used his AirPods, which is fine. You'll adjust. You'll get used to it. If it's your first time, you might be like, what is with this podcast? This sound sucks. But I think it's fine. You tend to get used to it. You adjust, and then he just sounds like that. It sounds like a phone call. But it was great. We talk about a lot of things. We get into one night, a homeless person was attacking a woman, and Doug stepped in. And then he had to stand trial for the guy, and we talk all about that. And that stuff is really interesting. And we talk about OCD, therapy, drinking, weed, all of those things. And it was just a really interesting episode. And yeah, so that's that. That's what the episode's about. And how are you doing? I hope you're doing okay. I am. It's a full-time job, staying on an even keel, as you know. I'm doing therapy. I talk to sober people a lot, and I read a lot of books such as Thich Nhat Hanh, The Art of Living. I just have books all over the place now. Next to my bed, on my couch, I'm reading a book called Buddhism Without Beliefs by Stephen Batchelor. That's around my house somewhere. I'm always drinking. I'm always reading some kind of sobriety literature. For me personally, I said drinking, that was like Freudian, I guess. I always have a Thich Nhat Hanh around. I'm always listening to, we talk about it a little bit on this episode, Dan Harris's podcast, 10% Happier. I use the Sam Harris Waking Up app, as you guys know, and the Calm app. It's a full-time job, staying on an even keel, but it's working. I feel the change in myself from years ago. I hope other people can see it and feel it, and you can do it. And that's another thing we talk about is you can just begin again. Begin today. Listen to this and then go meditate. Try to be a little kinder, a little more compassionate. Listen a little more. Open up your mind. Maybe avoid social media just a little bit more today. Be conscious of putting your phone down a little bit more. And maybe reach out to some loved ones. Have a conversation. This morning I talked to Chris Allen, past guest. And we talked about the Capitol situation and a little bit of politics, a little bit of race, and just had a really great conversation, good dialogue that ended with, man, I feel good. That was great. And so maybe take it offline and take it to your friends. I don't know. We're going to have to figure out how to keep it together. You know what I mean? So, yeah, that's what I think. I think we need maybe a little less whataboutism, but here I am trying to solve the problems here. But the key is to take care of ourselves first. Put your mask on before helping others. And in some ways, taking care of others is a good way to take care of yourself, being of service to others. So maybe I'm rambling now, but I don't know. I just want everyone to take care of themselves, and so they can take care of each other, and we can have a flourishing society for people like Doug, who has a small child, which you'll hear about. So that's enough rambling from me. I am grateful that you're listening. If you're a comedy fan and you happen to live near Royersford, Pennsylvania, I'll be there January 27th. I'll also be in Key West, Comedy Key West, February 11th through the 13th. And then in the spring and summer, hopefully I'll be back fully working. We get these vaccines out there and the warm weather and all that good stuff. So hopefully I'll be seeing you soon. In the meantime, please go review the podcast, give it a nice review, and go to my YouTube. Check out my YouTube, Joe List, and subscribe. Check out Joe and Ron Talk Movies. It's a lot of fun. And of course, Tuesdays with Stories is always new on Tuesdays in the Patreon. And you can go check out this podcast is also on YouTube. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the laugh button. And I guess that's it. Be kind to one another. Here's a little Thich Nhat Hanh. You know I love Thich Nhat Hanh. This is from the book The Art of Living, which I've read a couple times and just kind of open it up to random pages. And I opened it up to page 108. It says, living each moment as a way to realize our dreams. There is no difference between the end and the means. It's all about process, being in the moment. Stay connected. Whatever you're doing, try to be connected and present, and you'll have a good day. Now enjoy this conversation with my friend, the hilarious comedian, who you should all check out after listening to this, my friend, Doug Smith. All right, here we are. That's Doug Smith with, what do you got, an elephant? Is that a rhino or an elephant? Looks like
I got
a pillar.
What do we got? We got some sort of grub. We got a grasshopper. We got a rhino beetle. We got some other shit on the wall. We just moved in like a month ago, and so we basically stuck a bunch of fucking party favors on his wall.
Did you move to the country, or are you in the city still?
Oh, we're still in the city. We moved like pretty much diagonally across the street to an apartment we had been stalking for like a year, and we waited for the guy to move out, and we pounced on it, and it's been a fucking nightmare ever since.
Oh wow. Why is it a nightmare?
We did a bunch of renovations on it that we paid to do. So we had the floors redone, we had the whole thing repainted. It's a great apartment. It's a huge space. It's great, but like I am well, it'll lend itself into this podcast. Well, I have pretty bad OCD in terms of like tidiness and neatness and organization and things having their own, having their space. So any move is a fucking disaster for me. It doesn't matter how easy it is. And this one, there was like just dealing with a revolving door of contractors and just, fucking plumbers clinking around and paint chips falling. It was like the Money Pit. It was like living in the movie The Money Pit. I was stuck in a fucking hole screaming my brains out. It was nuts. So the dust is finally settling a little bit now.
Oh, okay.
And a half later.
I have a real soft spot, whatever you want to say, for the word disaster. Anytime somebody calls something a disaster, it's just one of those words to me that's just fucking hilarious to call. Because I think of, disaster, I think of like a tornado coming through and everything's destroyed and like, so the idea of a move being a disaster is really funny to me. It's just such a funny word.
This was an emotional disaster for sure. Yeah. And I've just been a fucking monster all month. I feel like my family hates me because I'm just like, is this where this goes? This doesn't go here. Come on, let's get our shit together. I'm just like, I'm finally starting to ease off now, finally, since we've, got stuff unpacked and arranged. But like the first couple of weeks was a low moment.
So it feels like it's just, you naturally turn into a parent, your own parent, you turn into that person by having a
Yeah.
kid. Like I was with my nephew all week, and even then I'm like, could you sit still for just 2 minutes? Just sit still. Like I don't get it. And it's hard to not turn into that because you want to have the compassion and empathy and all that bullshit. But it's hard not to be like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
So is that a natural move for you?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, I think my mom was so hyper organized to the point that we had a kitchen cabinet where you would open the door and she had, no joke, like probably 70 or 80 post-it notes lining the inside of the cabinet with just different tasks like scoop the litter box, sweep the garage, thaw the chicken, and she would take them off one by one and put them on the stove range as like reminders for herself to do things. Like that was her level of organization. Like all the picture frames on the wall had to be just right. We had a family friend who used to love to come over and just walk through the house, just knocking all the picture frames just slightly askew, and then just watch her walk through the house, being like, what happened here? Was there what happened?" Like just watching her lose her mind. So I feel like I definitely inherited some of that. And my dad was in the military, so he had that kind of like, when you're in the Marines and you're in boot camp, you have to make your bed a certain way and everything has to be done just so. So I think between the two of them, I was just, you know, uh, it was unavoidable. I never once had to be told as a kid to clean my room ever. I was always
Wow.
like hyper tidy, organized. That's not a good thing, like a kid should be a kid. A kid should have, you know, fucking spilled juice on the floor and not give a shit, and I was like the complete opposite.
Interesting. So that's interesting because a lot of times people, and I think I grew up very similarly. My mother's house is still like I was just up there, and it's
Yeah,
everything's immaculate and cleaned and dusted and level and even very similar OCD. Like the little towel on the stove, if it's just off a little bit, she's like, "What the fuck?" And it's like a physical reaction. But we just had
right.
Christmas, and she has this old antique Noel. I don't even know what Noel means, but I guess it's a Christmas thing. And
Yeah.
it's like four big block letters, like little statues. And I would always turn him to say Leon as a kid, which is a joke that was on Home Improvement. And I still do it. And like, it's not fun or funny for her. She's like
Yeah.
genuinely upset. And she's like, this is nuts. But I still do it because it's funny. But it's interesting though, because some people I think go the opposite way. It's like abuse where people either become abusers or they become like so adamantly anti-abuse. So not to
Right.
conflate abuse with cleanliness, but it sounds like you picked up the habit. You're continuing the abuse as it goes in this analogy. It's obviously not abusive to be clean, but
Yeah. I don't know, man. You're not too far off. I can be a real fucking anal asshole about it. And like my wife is the complete opposite, and it's I don't know if I want to say it's a good thing because it drives me nuts sometimes, but like for instance, like at one point our landlord, who's been super helpful throughout the whole process, he had to replace a tile by our bathtub, and so he came in one day and he had to cut the tile to fit this gap, and I watched him walk in with this little circular saw, and right as soon as I see the circular saw, I'm like, oh fuck, there's gonna be a bunch of dust in this bathroom. I can't handle this dust in the bath. Please don't tell me he's gonna. All right, it's just one tile. It's gonna be quick and easy and painless. So he closes the door and he's like, I'm just closing the door to keep the dust down. I'm like, how much fucking dust is this gonna be? So I'm sitting in the other room, and then sure enough, this thing goes off like 12 fucking times in the span of 3 minutes. And I'm just sitting at the dining room table, just pouring sweat, just fuming, knowing that I'm gonna walk in to a legitimate disaster. And sure enough, he leaves, and the entire bathroom is just coated in a thick sediment of gray dust. And I have to like leave in 5 minutes to pick my son up from school. So I'm like, all right, just don't worry about it. It's okay. It's okay. You'll get to it later. But it's just like hanging over my head all day. And then I get him back from school, and I'm trying to like, be engaged with him and be a dad, and play with him and just be present, and I'm just cannot stop dwelling on this fucking dust. And then finally I get around to cleaning it up, and it takes me like 2 hours. I'm like on my hands and knees, scrubbing the floors, wiping down the shower rod. And my wife comes in. I was like, can you believe the mess that Herb made? She's like, I didn't even notice it. And her saying that she didn't notice it sent me into like a blind rage. I was like, what are you kidding me? How does this not bother you? It's all over the towels. It's all over our toilet tray. Are you fucking insane? She's like, it's just a little dust. It doesn't bother me. And it was like her not seeing eye to eye with me on that was like, you might as well be from a different planet, you know? And we got into a huge fight because of it. And I was like, I'm going to like lose my fucking family because I'm so I'm so neurotic about this shit, you know?
Okay.
And I had to like give myself a real pep talk like a week ago and be like, dude, you have got to mellow the fuck out, or you're going to have this beautiful apartment all to yourself.
I had to take notes because I got so many questions that have been brought up here in my mind.
Yeah.
One is, first of all, one's a story. I don't know what this is. Sorry. Is there a new
Also,
link
I have to ask you not to go off on a tangent, because I was thrilled that you asked me to do this, because I've been listening to it recently, and I love it. I think it's great to, you know, normalize people's, not normalize, but, you know, people that talk about their neuroses and everything. Did anybody recommend me for this pod? Was anybody like, hey, you know who's a real basket case? You got to get Doug on, or did you just kind of have an idea that maybe I was?
No, well, I thought of you because I remember talking to you a little bit about mental stuff years ago, where we were talking about something about your upbringing, and then I was like, it's weird because you seem so normal, and you're like, I wear a lot of masks, and I remember that you said something along those lines about masks, and so ever since then I've been like, oh, he'd be great. Plus, I want to talk about your famous instance of thwarting a robber and what how that worked, the courage to do that and all that stuff. So I thought it would be an interesting conversation, but I didn't realize you had this crazy clean the house shit. So I have a number of follow-up questions with this dust thing. Well, two is the story. Question one is, why doesn't he clean it? Isn't that his job? He makes the mess and then cleans after it. Is that not, am I crazy?
Yeah, you would think so. I mean, he's like this, he's like in his late 70s. He's the landlord, you know, like it's not his job to do this stuff for us. He's just like a really helpful guy, and he's any task that we need done, he's like, well, I got it. I'll take care of it for you. So he's doing things that he's not required to do at all. He's being a help, but everything that he does is like completely half-assed, you know, like, and like the basement, for instance. I had to go down to the basement the other day, and I couldn't find the light switch, and I felt like I was Clarice in the end of Silence of the Lambs. I felt like there was going to be a dude behind me in night vision goggles, because it was just like wall to wall, just weird shit. He's just like a total hoarder. And so like he asked me for a dustpan and brush, and he swept up a little bit of shit on the floor, but it didn't matter. It was just a cloud that covered everything.
God, that's frustrating.
So it was left to me.
Fuck, my notes are so bad. Oh, this is the other question. One is going to be a story that's going to make you fucking throw up, but so I guess that was the question, is like, what is it that when you leave knowing there's dust, what is the feeling? What do you think is bothering you that there's dust? Is it that it's not going to be cleaned, or you need it cleaned? Like, how is there any part of you that's like, that's no big deal, when I get home I'll clean it then?
No, because well, part of it too is we don't have any like real storage set up in our bathroom yet. So all of our stuff, all of our toiletries are just out on surfaces. So there's just so many more places for dust to settle and collect. So I knew I was going to have to wipe down each, you know, tube of toothpaste, each toothbrush, each bottle of lotion, everything one at a time. And just knowing how long it was going to take me to do it, and also knowing that my wife wasn't going to do it because she doesn't give a rat's ass about that stuff, you know? So like, I know, and I have this running thing in my head that sucks, but it's very easy for me to feel overwhelmed by things and feel like everything is falling on me and that I
Yes.
have to take care of everything. So, but you're right. I mean, it's something that I talk to my therapist about all the time is like, what's the worst case scenario? What if you never cleaned that bathroom? What if the dust was still there now? Would it kill you? No. Would it harm you in any? No. It might make you a little like unnerved, upstairs, but it's not harming anybody or anything. It's just my personal preference for cleanliness. And it's almost like I feel like life in general, you have so little control. Horrible things can happen in any given instance. So I feel like any minor area of life where I can have control, that, the bathroom dust situation being one of them, it's like, okay, I don't have control over any other elements of my life. I don't have control over when any of my loved ones die. I don't have control over when I die. I do have control over how clean the bathroom is. And that's something I can handle to try to make myself feel better. But it doesn't. I think it will. I think it will alleviate that, but it doesn't. And the thing with cleanliness is, as soon as something is clean, especially when you live with other people. I have a wife, a kid, and I have 3 cats too.
Ooh.
As soon as something is clean, it's immediately being undone,
Right.
Like it immediately starts to depreciate in cleanliness.
Well, there's an old adage that I've probably said on this podcast before, so maybe you've heard it, but I try to keep in mind, but I'm like, anytime you are suffering in life, you can stop and ask yourself, what am I trying to control right now? And it's almost always something. That's why you're either anxious or angry or upset. You're trying to control something. In this case, your house being clean, which is difficult. Is Alan your therapist?
No, he's not.
Because it sounds like Alan. That sounds very Alan-y. To accept your worst fear. But yeah, I have a very similar thing where I feel like, and I'm working on it, so I'm improving a little bit with it, but I have this thing too, where when, we're about to podcast and I got a late start because I was having this long conversation with a friend of mine. And then, so I was eating a bagel and then you were like, hey, send me the email. And I was like, oh shit, it's like 11:55. And I was like, I have to clean up this peanut butter. Like the peanut butter jar was out, the knife was out. And I was like, just go record. And I was like, I won't be able to record knowing that this plate and knife and peanut butter jar are out. But in reality, I'm like, just record the pot. Like somehow I feel like my life is out of control if I have an open peanut butter jar sitting in my living room, where I could just do the podcast and then go get it. And I also have this feeling of like, if my wife comes in the house and there's just a peanut butter jar, she's gonna be like, I married a piece of shit. He's a loser. Everybody hates me. And it becomes this huge fucking attack on me. I'm a failure because I didn't put away a peanut butter jar, which will take 10 seconds, which I did do. I didn't leave it out there. But so I relate is what I'm saying.
That. Yeah, I get it. I totally get it, man. And you know what? I actually have the same fear too. I think if I don't take care of this, somebody's going to be mad at me about it, because that is how I grew up. Everything, the sink was never left with a single dish. At the end of the night, the sink was clean. There was not a single dish left in the sink. The countertops were clean. And like, if you fucked that up, you would hear about it, like I said, my wife's the complete opposite. I could leave a fucking dead rat in the sink and she wouldn't even notice, but in my head, I think, well, I have to do this because this is just what you're supposed to do. This is what being an adult is. You're a neurotic mess trying to just tidy and organize and clean up after yourself all the time. And it doesn't work. It really doesn't make a difference.
It sounds like we both have our mothers in our head, basically. Like our parents are living in our head being like, you got to clean up that mess. There's a Post-it note on your fucking skull that says, hey, clean up this dust. Or else your life will be shit. It's a weird self-criticism, I think, probably. But I just want to tell you this too. I had a thing recently where my wife and I have Sarah, Sarah, like we have a downstairs basement apartment office now, and there's a bathroom down there. And there was some kind of sewerage issue in our entire building, which is 4 apartments. and the shit, everyone's shit, all 4 apartments exploded out of the shower of our downstairs apartment. So I went down there, and like I'm similar to you, and I went down there, and like there's like a mushroom cloud of feces all in the shower, just like pieces of shit, diarrhea all over the place, and I almost threw up. Like I was like almost barfing, and I just thought you have this dust. I'm like, what would you do if there was shit everywhere? I had to call my landlord, and it was similar though, where I was like, this is insane, and I had to just go upstairs, and we sat there, and I was like, all right, he's cleaning it because he's a good landlord, and that's his job or whatever. But
Yeah.
I guess I just bring
Oh
it up
my
because I was
God.
just listening to your story of dust, and I was like, well, how would you feel about your neighbor's fucking fecal matter in your bathroom?
Uh, I would chain them to the bathroom stall and burn the place down. That's what I would do. No brainer.
But
That's awful.
yeah, it's clean now. And by the way, I was talking to a friend, and he's like, well, why didn't you clean it? And I was like so blown away by that. I'm like, it's his home. I'm renting his home. We didn't, it's not like we did, it's not like I threw a shoe in the toilet and it exploded. It's
Yeah.
like I'm renting a home and shit exploded everywhere. That's not my job to clean that.
Yeah. You don't really want your hands coming in contact with your neighbor's shit. That's a little bit of a crossing of boundaries, I'd say.
Yeah, nor my shit. But anyways, but yeah, I have similar issues. I have this with, do you have this thing with emails or texts? Like right now, the way my Zoom is set up, my what do you call it? Internet Explorer, whatever the fuck it is, Chrome is like behind it, and I can see my inbox ticking up like above your head.
Oh,
I just see the
geez.
little leaf. And so I have this thing of like, there's gonna be too many emails. I gotta respond. If I see the little red thing on email, I'm like, I gotta respond to this now because I can feel it. Like if I'm out going to get lunch or something, I'm just like, I know I have unanswered emails, and that's something I'm trying to work on.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it sucks that we live in an age where people think that they have access to you 24 hours a day, and if you don't respond to something, they, I've been guilty of it. I've been guilty of texting or emailing somebody, and especially if it's somebody that I know is on their phone all fucking day and they don't
Right.
respond, I take it as an insult. It's
Exactly.
like, why am I'm just being ignored here? What the hell's going on? But in actuality, like you have the right to get back. It's almost like you can get back to something right away in a half-assed way, or you can, like, especially if somebody's asking you something that requires a bit of thought or a measured response. Like it's okay to wait an hour. It's okay to wait a day to thoughtfully respond to somebody. But we're like programmed now to, you have to. It's yeah. It's almost like you feel like you're on call all the time.
Right.
Like anybody could just hit you up at any given moment, and you have to. That's how I feel. I mean, I feel like an impetus to respond anytime anybody hits me up with anything.
Yeah, and it's like a tennis match where I just feel like I have to be like, yeah, because I'll see you on the fifth, and I shoot it back because I'm like, I don't want the ball in my side of the court, and then
Yeah,
it
yeah,
comes
yeah.
back again. You're like, fuck, and a lot of times you have this feeling of like having to have everything done. I think a lot of times I listen to all these psychology podcasts and read all these books constantly now, but I think a lot of times people live as though life is something that's going to happen in the future. Like once I have all my emails answered and all the dust has been cleaned up and I've finished all my post-its, then I'll really start to live. But it's a continuous thing. It keeps
Yeah, yeah,
coming, which is frustrating. Now,
absolutely.
does your anxiety, OCD and stuff, does it ever manifest itself physically? Because that's what I have. Like I have a toothache, my stomach hurts, I shit blood, you know what I mean? Like my eye twitches, whatever it is. I mean, do you have that? Like, how does it manifest? Do you have chest pains? Do you shake? What goes on over there?
um, does it manifest itself physically? You know what? I'd say it can sometimes, in terms of like my digestion. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm shitting blood, but I've definitely had shitting issues over the years. I did quit drinking a year and about 3 months ago, and that definitely improved things in terms of my shitting situation. But yeah, if I'm like really stressed out, I will have some shitting issues. Unfortunately, like I'll like start breaking out sometimes. But it's more of just a complete mental spiral into insanity and not taking in the feelings of people that are close to me and have to deal with me on a regular basis, and just
Right.
being very like one track mind. And like I said, like I mean I'm in therapy against like probably the fourth or fifth therapist that I've had in 10 years. And this guy that I have now is great, because he basically takes all of my anxieties and almost kind of magnifies them and throws them back in my face in a way that I can see the insanity and hilarity of it all, you know? Like I was talking to him about when we were in the height of moving in, and there were still all these contracts. It was just a revolving door of contractors. And I know nothing about this shit. I'm not handy at all. I don't know how to operate a drill. I'm a fucking embarrassment of a man. And so like,
Same.
I was like, I just feel like I'm completely out of my element here. These guys are just going to come in and just name a fucking price, and I don't even know how much things are supposed to cost. And I'm like, I'm worried that they're going to like rip me off. And he's like, yeah, I mean, of course they will. I mean, they're not gonna overcharge you by a couple hundred. They're probably gonna rip you off by a couple grand. They're probably gonna kidnap your kid. Maybe they'll even kill him and cut his toes off. Like, he said this to me, and I was just like, it broke the tension in such a way that I'm like, first of all, I can't believe this is a therapist and this is his profession. This is like, for most people, I feel like he couldn't say that and get away with it. But for me, it works, because I almost need things to be blown out of proportion in a way for me to realize that I don't have to fret so much. I don't have to worry about worst case scenario all the fucking time. And that worrying about worst case scenario doesn't stop it from happening, you know?
Interesting. Yeah. So that he sounds a lot like my therapist, who's like that. He says like, "You're a pussy. Fuck you," and he
Yeah.
swears and stuff and calls me a pussy. But it's funny because you said when you're talking about them ripping you off, he's like, of course they're gonna rip you off. And I always talk about it like that's become like my mantra, of course, because I'll start having anxiety and I'm like, I'm losing my mind. I have this thing, and I'm like, oh, of course I am. That's my baseline. And then also accepting your worst fear. Like again, it's like the dust. Like, okay, so worst case scenario, your bathroom is dusty for the next 3 days or whatever. What can you live with that? Is it going to affect? Are you going to die? Is your baby going to be sick because of it? I mean, the baby might be sick, I guess, if there's that much dust in there. But
right, yeah.
Or do you even have a baby? I guess he's
mesothelioma, no big deal.
How old's your kid?
5 now. He's 5, so he can handle some black lung.
That's insane that your kid is
right?
5. That is fucking weird. I would have guessed like 16 months. Life is weird. Time flies.
He
I
has
guess.
to correct me every day.
That's insane. I forget what I was gonna say. Oh, somehow that reminded. This might have nothing to do with anything, but I remember watching an episode of like Cops or something, and the cop was talking about how he pulled someone over, and he's like, "Do you have any alcohol in the car? Do you have any cocaine in the car? Do you have any wild animals in the car?" And the reason they ask that is to see if the person if they break and kind of laugh or smile or acknowledge it. If they keep saying no, it's more likely they're lying. Like if they're like, no alcohol, no. And then you're like, any dead hooker? No. A normal person would be like, no, I don't have any. That's crazy.
Right.
I don't know if that has anything to do with anything, but I just thought of it when someone like matter of factly is, no, I have no wild animals in my car. But it reminded me of that in that the therapist throws out some crazy examples, and it makes you kind of break and be like, okay, I see what's going on here. Instead of you being like, yeah, he could. It might cut my kid's toes off. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, because I feel like in the past with therapists, when I'm talking about my anxieties, they'll try to be very understanding and be like, yeah, I understand, you know, contractors can rip people off, and I know it must be very stressful, but it's almost like, me personally, I mean, it's it's a varies case by case, but me personally, I feel like that doesn't work for me. I almost don't really want somebody to sympathize with me too much, because I don't want it normalized. You know what I mean? I want I want to get out of this kind of hellscape that I feel when I'm going into that headspace. So to have somebody kind of point it out as ridiculous really pulls me out of it in a way that I need. And I haven't found it until I found this therapist. And it's great. It's like exactly what I need.
Again, I have two thoughts. One is, acceptance is the key to everything. To kind of accept that you feel that way, that you to first like accept like, okay, I have OCD or I get freaked out if stuff is a mess. And then once you accept it, people I think conflate or confuse that, like they think accepting means like not changing, of like, okay, I've accepted this, so I'm just going to be this way. But that's not the case. Like you can accept something and still want to change it. Like you can accept that your wife is mad at you, but it doesn't mean you're like, great, my wife's going to be mad at me for the next 50 years. Like you accept that she's mad at you now and then it worked to improve it. So you can accept that you have anxiety or OCD or neurosis. And then that's like the first step in improving it and changing it for the better.
Sure.
But I also want to bring up, so you quit drinking, and maybe we've talked about it a little bit. So over a year ago, and are you getting help to quit drinking, or you just decided to stop cold turkey?
No, I didn't even make a conscious choice to quit. I had been drinking every day since I was 17. So, I mean, we can open up a whole can of worms here. When you were talking about me saying, have you ever had a quote that you said back to you and you're like, yeah, Christ, I said that? When you said when you said that, I said I wear many masks. I would have been like, man, I'm never talking to this guy again. This guy's a fucking creep. But I started drinking. My mom died when I was 17, and so I started drinking like shortly after she died. And I drank pretty much every day up until a year ago. So I had like a solid 20 years of drinking every day, and there were definite periods where it was problematic. I'd say when I first moved to New York, I was definitely an alcoholic because I would drink like at least a 6-pack a night, and I never got hungover. But I would at like 5 o'clock in the afternoon start to get like shaky hands. I would start to get those delirium tremors. And that's almost scarier. You know what I mean? It's almost just like coursing through your bloodstream all the time so that you go through withdrawal. And it wasn't even necessarily like I'm doing this for fun. It's like this is just maintaining a base level for me at this point. But the last couple of years, it was just like, at the end of the day, because I'm basically the stay-at-home parent, my wife is working full time. So at the end of a long day, it's like that was kind of the signifier of being off duty. You know what I mean? Like, I'll have a glass of wine, I'll have a beer, just enough to get tired and bloated and spend money, And I'd been feeling like kind of, like I said, kind of feeling bloated and having gross shits and everything. And I thought, I've tried everything else. I've tried all kind of weird diets. I was gluten-free for a month. I was vegan for a month. Nothing worked. And then finally I thought, the one thing I've never given up is booze. So I was like, let me take one night off. I think I can take one night off. And I did, and I had an amazing night's sleep. And then I took another night, and it just kind of snowballed. I never was like, I'm done drinking. This is a problem. It's fucking ruining my life. Because it wasn't. It was not an out of control thing. I just kind of decided to wean myself off, and then here we are a year and 3 months later, and I honestly don't miss it. I really don't. Because I still smoke weed.
I knew there had to be some kind of catch.
Yeah.
Something's missing here. No, okay.
Don't give me too much credit here.
The mask thing, that's funny because we were drinking. I mean, we were on the golf course in Queens, which the par 3 thing, and I think we would go out there and just fucking get ripped and smoke weed. Remember, there was the guy in the golf cart.
Sure, yeah. He's still there. The guy who show you pictures of his kids and sell you loose joints at the same time.
Yeah, so if anyone lives in New York, you can go to this par three. It's out by the tennis center and the World's Fair and all that stuff. And there's a guy that sells booze out of a cooler in the golf cart, and he sells you weed at the same time. So we would go out there and get all tuned up. And this has nothing to do with anything, but I think it was you got livid, and it was my fault. You and Matt had a show, and we were taking do you remember this? We were taking the train back to the city. We were going to be late. We were all fucked up. And I kept saying, you guys were kind of bickering about getting there and being on time. And I kept saying, don't take this train. You got to wait for an express because the express is like two stops. And we let like 3 trains pass. And then finally we realized there is no express running back. Like it doesn't work that way. There's no express train running into the city at that hour. And so we just sat there for like an extra 15 minutes and you guys were already late. And it was like totally my fault. And I felt bad. But
Jesus Christ. See that right there. I mean, I remember how wrecked we used to get playing golf. Couldn't even swing the club by the back nine. And the idea of actually going to do a show after that is insane. The amount of show, I mean, I'm sure you did too. The amount of shows that I used to do wrecked is just embarrassing. It's embarrassing that I actually took a microphone out of a stand and subjected people to God knows what. I mean, there were some times I would get off stage and get home and wake up the next morning and be like, I don't even know what I did at that show. I have no idea.
Yeah, 100% all the time. And I remember thinking too, because I was drinking a lot then. I remember thinking like, these two are idiots. They have a show tonight. I was smart enough to not book a show.
Yeah.
We were going golfing in the afternoon, fucking morons. But of course, I was just going home to get more blacked out drunk or whatever. But anyways, you were drinking. And I think we were talking about your mother when you said that thing, because I must have asked you about where you were from. I think you're from Connecticut. Is that right? You grew up
right
in Connecticut?
Yep.
And yeah, I remember you talking about that. And then you said your mother had died and maybe something else. And that's when you were like, I wear a lot of masks, and we were drinking and smoking at the time. But it's funny because you were like, I would never hang out with this guy again. I was like, this guy's fucking deep, man. I love this guy. I never thought to put it that way, because I was high and drunk and being like, I'm going to start using that. And I'm sure I was like, for 6 weeks, I was at parties being like, I'm wearing a mask right now. Mask, baby.
You think you see me, but surprise, surprise.
But that's great that you're not drinking anymore. Because to be honest, I mean, you're a guy that, while I've been sober for years now, I was like, that guy should probably get sober.
yeah. And like, as far as, not that I'm trying to like defend myself or anything, but the weed thing too is another. It's really just like, at the end of the day, and I think I've talked to other parents that feel this way. It's like when you're with a kid all day, and your workplace, so to speak, is the home. You don't feel like you kind of like, I shouldn't say you. I feel like I need to feel like I'm clocking out or checking out at the end of the day by having some me time, whatever that looks like. And unfortunately, it can look like just having a bit of an escape. So that's why there's, all these things like mommy wine time and all these suburban moms getting shithoused at 5 o'clock, because they're like, oh, my husband's home. I'm going to fucking booze up and pass out on the couch because I'm off duty, but you're still in the work. You're still in your home,
Right.
So you almost have to have like this mental escape. So for me, it's like, I'll smoke a little weed like at the very end of the night, it's not like an all day thing like it once was. But even that is something that I've been giving a lot of thought about recently. Being like, well, if I'm really mentally healthy and stable, do I need that? Will I one day be able to eliminate that? And I think I will, because I mean, only 2 years ago I was on antidepressants, drinking a ton, and smoking weed, and now like I'm off antidepressants, I'm off booze. I mean, the weed is still there, but like I do feel like if you really got your head screwed on, you don't need any of that. And I don't want to diminish antidepressants either, because some people do chemically really do need that. And when I was on them, I really did. And coming off. Have you been on antidepressants? You have, right?
Yeah, well,
Never?
I took Paxil for years, which was like a sort of anti-anxiety, I guess. But I think
Yeah.
it's prescribed for depression too, maybe, I believe. But all my depression was always from anxiety. Like I was like, I'm so
Yeah.
fucking anxious, and it makes me want to just stay home or like, why am I this anxious? I have no quality of life. I hate myself. So the depression would sneak in and still does. So, but yeah, I took Paxil for years and just got myself off of it. But similar to you, I was drinking at the time, and alcohol is a depressant. So it's funny to take antidepressants while also pouring depressant into you. It's like, yeah, if you cut out the alcohol, then you're going to be a lot less depressed. You just are, which is like hard to believe because people think, well, I'm drinking because I'm depressed. And you're like, well, you're just throwing gasoline on the fire.
Right.
And you're
Right.
not really dealing with anything. And that's what, like, to what you're saying, I don't think it's horrible that you smoke weed every night, but you could also get that mental break through meditation at the end of the night. You could do a little
Sure.
meditation and kind of clear the day and separate the day that way also.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Are you a
I mean,
meditator at all?
I've tried it. Um, it's not easy. I mean, it's funny because like the practice itself, the physical practice of meditation really couldn't be easier.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're really just sitting there doing nothing.
Simple but not easy, as they say.
Yeah, yeah. But really just focusing on your breath and allowing thoughts to pass through is it really is much easier said than done. I've done it. I've never committed to it. I did like 2 years ago. I downloaded this app called, I think it's called 10% Happier. It's like a meditation app.
Yeah, it's a podcast as well. I listen to it every week. Dan Harris.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I did like this 7-day free trial of 10% Happier, and I did a couple of these guided meditations, and I was like, oh, this is great. I think, yeah, this is something I could get into. And then I forgot to cancel it. So the 7-day free trial ended, and then I got a charge for $100 for a yearly subscription to 10% Happier. And I was like, well, I guess I'm fucking meditating now because I just dropped $100 on this thing, and I still didn't use it. So it's like, first of all, now I'm definitely not 10% happier because I just got fucking bamboozled out of $100 against my will. and I'm not using it. So I just have this fucking app on my phone that I, and ironically, it's like right next to my Instagram app. You know what I mean? And it's like,
yeah,
which do you choose? And it's always like click, scroll, when I could be using something that I just dropped 100 clams on.
Well, so here's one of the great lessons and principles of meditation is begin again. And so you have this opportunity. When we finish, you should go hit that app, meditate today, because this is what happens for me, and I think for most people, like scientifically or whatever. If you skip a couple days, then you go, I'm a piece of shit. I couldn't do that. I'm not doing it. I'm never going to meditate. I had the chance to. I had the app. It's right there. I look at it every day, and I don't do it because I suck. But you can break that cycle anytime. You can always begin again and go, all right, well, I'm just going to do it today. And it's the same with not drinking or a meditation practice or a workout. It's like you don't have to be like, I'm going to meditate every day. You can only do today because this is the only day that exists. So you can meditate today and then worry about tomorrow. Same with, drinking. You're like, just don't drink today and don't worry about, your 40th birthday or whatever, which is fast approaching, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, that really is a good way of looking at it. And honestly, I don't think that I would have been able to give up drinking if I didn't have that approach to it, because like I said, it wasn't a hard and fast, I'm done, never again. It was literally one day at a time. And I wasn't putting any pressure on myself. It was just like, you went a day, you feel good, go another day. How do you feel now? Good. Okay. Go another day. And it just kept going. And I also waited like a good 6 months before I told anybody.
Yeah, that's important.
My wife obviously knew, but I didn't want to like because when I went vegan for a month, I thought that I was committed to that. And I told everybody like 2 weeks in, I was like, I'm done with animal products. This is the way to live. And then a month later, I caved and looked like a fucking schmuck. So like, yeah, with drinking, I didn't, shoot my mouth off for a good like 6 months. And then slowly I was like, yeah, I haven't drank in almost in half a year. And people that knew me really well were like, what? Really?
Yeah, that's always a weird eye-opening experience. I always talk about that when I got sober. Like, I got sober 3 days after Christmas. For Christmas 2012, I got all alcohol. That was like the only gifts I got. My whole family got me like nips and a handle and a bottle, and it was like this thing of like, I guess I'm the alcohol guy. And the same feel like when I was drinking, but like there'd be a night where I wasn't drinking, people were like, hey, where's your drink? How come you don't have? Where's your beer? I'd be like, oh shit. You have that moment of like, people look at it as like alcohol is like an extension of me. It's like if I didn't have my glasses on, I went to a party, people would be like, hey, how come you don't have a Bud Light? What's going on here? Or Jaeger Bomb or Captain Coke. I don't want people to think I'm a pussy drinking Bud Light. Like a fucking nerd. But you kind of realize you're like, oh, this is what I've been identified as. I'm this guy. But with the telling everybody too, like I always see that on Facebook. I'll see people like, I haven't had a drink in 1 week, baby. And I'm like, just quietly do that. Because what happens is then you announce it and everyone's like, yeah. And then when you drink, then if you drink, you feel all this shame and you just feel like, oh, I'm an asshole. I'm letting everybody down. Everybody thinks I'm a piece of shit. So it's better to just kind of maybe tell one person or tell other people that are also sober and kind of talk to them. But I do think those big grand announcements are always just, they set you up to feel like a failure later. When people do that with like, I'm moving to LA and they have a big party and then 3 months later they come home and they're just like, I couldn't do it. I'm a piece of shit, whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely, man. You got to keep that shit close to the vest.
But that's great that you're sober. I do want to talk about your incident. I'm sure you probably always talk about it and you don't want to be identified as the fucking fought a homeless guy, but I want to know the feelings about it. And I think we probably talked about this on Tuesdays with Stories also. And I'm sure, like I said, I'm sure you've talked about it on 500 podcasts, but I want to hear about it from the sort of the mental aspect and going through it. So basically, I guess you can sort of tell the story. You don't have to do the full version, but what happened and what was the feeling and emotion leading up to it and making that decision?
So it was 2011. And I was leaving Cabin, which was a show that was in the East Village that, it was like a major hang spot every Thursday night. It was a killer show and it was always packed, and it was like the place to go on Thursday night. So I left Cabin and I was heading back to Brooklyn. I was heading back to Park Slope to have a drink with our buddy Matt Wayne. And it was like 10 o'clock at night on a Thursday. And I went down into the 2nd Avenue station and there was a woman screaming and nobody was paying any attention because, people, it's New York, people don't give a shit. And she kept screaming and I glanced over and I actually, this was one of the few nights that I wasn't drunk. I maybe had like 2 PBRs, but I was of sound mind. I didn't have that, I wasn't full of liquid courage or anything. And, this woman is she's pinned against the wall by this guy who's trying to rip her clothes off. And as she's screaming, he hauls off and he just punches her in the face. And I yelled some shit out to him. And finally he sees that I'm not going to be deterred anytime soon. So he lets her go. She runs out of the station and he kind of turns his attention toward me. And I had never been in a fight. And all that year, I just turned 38. I was like 28. And it's ironic because I had been like kind of talking all that year of like, I can't believe I'm 28 years old and I've never been in a fight. Like, how do I know what I'm made of? I've never gotten punched in the face. I've never punched anybody in the face. I need to get punched in the face to see what I'm made of. I need to get in a tussle,
That sounds like a drunk person talking, by the way. That's like the most common drunk conversation of like, punch me in the face, bro.
Yeah, I can take it. I know you love me. So like, I was like, I did have the thought of like, all right, this guy's coming toward me. I could either run away or this is a perfect opportunity to see what I'm made of. So he comes toward me and I'm telling him to back. I'm like, back the fuck up, man. Back the fuck up. And he's got a crazy look in his eye and he keeps approaching me. And I step in and I fucking swing for the fences. And I'm like a good 8 feet away from him when I swing on him. So I just like swing and a miss, just whiff. And he steps in, clobbers me. I come back, kick him in the balls, and he runs out of the station. And I'm feeling like, all right, well, I kicked him in the balls. That was kind of a bitch move, but I took a punch. I'm still here. Like that wasn't so bad. I showed him. He fucking ran off like a pussy. So then I turn to get on the train, and a woman stops me and tells me that there's blood pouring out of my face. And sure enough, I look down and it's just like streaming down my jacket onto my shoes.
Ugh.
And I was like, oh fuck yeah, he obviously had some sort of a blade in his hand that I didn't see. And so she brought me up to the street level and called an ambulance. And a million cops on the scene within like 2 minutes. And the ambulance took about 20. So I'm just standing there with a wad of napkins on my face.
God, like Steve Buscemi in Fargo.
Yeah, dude, exactly. Yeah, they were starting to like, the blood was like starting to coagulate, and all the cops wanted to see it. So I would like peel the napkins off. They're like, oh, and so the ambulance finally showed up, brought me to the Bellevue ER, and then they stitched me up like 23 stitches, and they got the guy outside of the same subway station like 2 days later. He was a homeless guy with no priors other than like public intoxication. And then I had to testify against him in court. And there was, not luckily, but for better or worse, there was another woman in the station that same night that he attacked. And so between me and her, we picked him out of a lineup, and we both testified against him, and he got locked up. He got sentenced to 15 years. He's probably out right now looking for me. But yeah, that was his sentence, was 15 years.
Yeah. So, sorry, I have so many questions, but
yeah,
I'll go in reverse. Like, so when you're sitting there, I assume you're on the stand and he's in the fucking room, or was it not like that? It wasn't like, so he's looking right at you.
Yeah, that was the scariest part of the whole thing. It really was. Like the whole altercation between me and him was, went by in a blur. Like that I don't really have any, I wouldn't say I have any like real like PTSD from any of it really, but that was kind of small potatoes. But like having to point to the guy and be like, that's the guy, and just having him stare back at me with just cold, dead, remorseless eyes was terrifying. Because I'm like, all right, I'm basically ending this guy's life for what it's worth, sending him to jail for 15 years, and he's watching me do this to him,
Right.
So that was the scariest part of the whole thing for sure.
Yeah. And so once again, I'm always talking about physical manifestations, but like, are you shaking? Is your heart pounding when you're because I've never heard this part of the story.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that was scary. And I didn't, I needed the prosecuting attorney that he had to like kind of give me a pep talk beforehand. He was like, listen, I know he's going to be scary. He's going to be in the room. He's going to be looking at you. Don't let him intimidate you. This is a bad guy. He roughed up 2 women and you in one night. Like, this guy's got to be put away. It's going to be up to you to get it done. And I was like, okay, I mean, I can't puss out on this,
And so did he have a public defender that tried to make a case of insanity or drug abuse, or anything like that? Or did he have nobody?
He had a public defender. What did they say? I don't know if they pled insanity, but I can't even remember whatever it was full of holes, because the judge, it wasn't, the
like
judge
your face.
there was no hey yo, it was a no-brainer for the judge. She was like, okay, yeah, you're done, man. So I always think it must be crazy for those public defenders to get these guys and just like, all right, well, there's really nothing we can do for you, man. And you fucked up your fingerprints, or so they found the box cutter. It was a little like razor blade, like that you slip into a box cutter. So they found that as well with my blood on it, his fingerprint. I mean, it was, you know, the evidence was astounding. So there was no chance for him to get out of this.
Well, and so the guy himself, was he, when he was on the stand or running away, I mean, was he like a ragged homeless person? Was he like a junkie, or just a complete crazy person, or what are we talking about here?
He did not look homeless. He wasn't, you know, he wasn't wearing like trash bags on his feet or anything like that. He was, you know, he looked like a normal guy.
Oh, okay.
But he was 51-year-old homeless guy. You know, I guess a drunk. Like I said, he had some public intoxication charges, but that was it. He had no violent history at all. So yeah, that was it. But I was back in the same subway station, like, I'd say like 2 weeks later, because, you know, the East Village is where I would wind up doing a lot of mics and shows and stuff. And I think that was good for me to like kind of get back on the horse in terms of like not avoiding that subway station, you know. And I lost a lot of blood on that mezzanine there too. So it wasn't on the platform. It was like right as you swipe your card to go down the stairs to the platform. I lost a lot of fucking blood on that mezzanine area, and I looked for it, and they cleaned it up well. There's no evidence of it at all.
Yeah, they must be good at that, because otherwise there would be blood all over the fucking city.
Yeah, right.
No one would move here. What was the Second Avenue stop?
Yeah.
Wait,
so
I interrupted. Sorry.
So like, yeah, like I wouldn't say that I had any real like PTSD from it. Like I was able to go in and out of that station, no problem. But I don't know if you remember, like 5 years ago, I did like 3 episodes of a web series called that Dan Hershon, our buddy Dan Hershon, worked on with me and shot and edited for me. It was called Secret Weapon, and I basically played like a urban survival expert, and the whole inspiration for it was this incident. So like, because I remember maybe 6 months after it happened, I was on the train, and there was a guy on the train pacing back and forth, kind of muttering to himself, and it kind of kept, you know, getting a little bit more amplified. He kept kind of up in the ante on the crazy and started screaming and punching windows and shit. And it became scary for sure. And you could see people kind of just staring at the ground, trying not to make eye contact with him. But there was a definite like palpable tension on this subway car, and he was pacing back and forth, and it was just like, is this guy gonna fucking unload on somebody? Like, he's punching windows now, but who knows when he's gonna, you know, take aim at a person. So I'm sitting there, and I had just finished a slice of pizza, and without even having the conscious thought, I started folding my paper plate in a way where I looked down, and I had like folded this paper plate into like a perfect like pointy shiv, like a shank, to like take this guy out. And I'm like leaning forward in my seat, and I'm like ready to hop up and just like fucking stab this guy in the eye at a moment's notice. And at that moment, I kind of like was able to kind of objectively look at the whole experience and be like, all right, I didn't think I had any PTSD. I don't feel traumatized by this, but obviously I'm like hyper alert to scenarios where shit could go down. So I kind of use that as a jumping off point for like, what if I played like an urban survival guide where I'm like teaching people how to fashion weapons out of inanimate objects and stuff like that. So, but other than that, yeah, like it wasn't my landlord making a bunch of dust in the bathroom is much more problematic than getting stabbed in the face.
Yeah, it's so interesting because that feels like it would be, I'd have fucking crazy PTSD. I mean, I had an incident on the subway where I was on the 7 train, and I was going from Queensboro Plaza to I was going to Hot Soup, Lexington and 59, which is a long, for those non-New Yorkers, which is a long like underground
Yeah.
passage. And I was on the last car, and it wasn't late at night. I was on my way to a show. It was like 7:30, and it was me, and there was like a guy, obviously some kind of junkie or wino or whatever, like passed out on the end of the car. And I didn't think anything of it because it was just like looked like some kind of homeless person or just someone that had passed out, like not unlike us in our drinking days. And then a group of like 7 or 8 teenagers got on the train at Queensboro, and they were, rabble rousers and whatever,
Yeah.
jumping and yelling, and they were screaming at the guy. And it's a long passage it's probably like relatively long, like 4 minutes. And they started like hawking loogies on the sleeping guy and screaming like, "Wake up!" and just like spitting on him. And so my heart rate starts going up because they're just like fucking with him. Obviously, they don't give a fuck about this human being. And so I'm just like staring at my phone. And then one of the kids is like, "Hey, fucking look over here." And I didn't want to. I knew they started to engage me. And now I'm just like praying. And there's nowhere to go because I'm on the last car and it's just us. And there's 7 or 8 of them. And then one guy was like, "Look up at me or I'll kill you." And the other guy was like, "If you look up, I'll kill you." And they kind of started yelling at me and calling me a fucking
When you
whatever.
wish you were a chameleon, you could have one eye doing one thing while the other eye.
Yeah, it was just like, it was horrible. But then everyone's like, "Dude, you should have just punched one of them," yada yada. I'm like, I can't beat up. And I've been training in mixed martial arts for a little bit, so I have a little more knowledge. But I'm like, I'm not going to beat up 8 people. I don't know what situation you think is going to happen that me, Joe List, is just going to fucking tune up a bunch of people. They were probably like 18 or 19. And eventually we got to the stop and they didn't do shit. They were just screaming. But anyways, I got off the train, like my fucking heart was pounding. And I was like, God, that was horrifying. And I still now, I'm like, I'm not getting on the last train car. I want to have an out. And I'm always like conscious. I won't get on an empty train car either. I'm like, I'll go to where there's at least a few people, which is ironic now with COVID. Now you want the empty train car, I guess. But anyways, it was a traumatic moment. And I had that feeling of like, you have that fight, flight, freeze feeling of like, okay, I guess if they do come over here, I guess I'll do my best to engage one of them. But I don't know how I'm going to beat up all of these people. But anyways, my point is I would feel traumatized from that. But I guess you won the fight. I mean, you got a good kick in and he left, and a sexy scar out of it. So I guess you were victorious.
It was the best thing. It was the best thing to happen to my. I mean, that's the sick thing about being a comic too. Is like any sort of crazy shit that goes down, your immediate first thought is like, is this a bit? And right. I remember having that thought standing on the street, bleeding all over my shoes. I'm like, well, I guess I'm going to be talking about this for the next couple of months, and then.
And here we are years later.
Yeah, it wound up being, I told the story on This Is Not Happening, and it was, it was a huge boost for me. So honestly, I don't look back on it in a negative light at all. If anything, scars starting to fade a little bit. I need to find the guy and have him tune me up some more, re-up my street cred.
I think I recommended you for that show.
Did you?
By the way, I pushed it on Ari. I was like, you got to get this guy. Yeah.
Holy shit!
I got his big ugly. I got his big ugly dumb ears. So whatever that was worth. And then he said you weren't as great as I said you would be. So I don't know. That part I made up. I don't want you to take that. I'm only that part as a joke. But so this is last question. We got to wrap it up here. But did you ever communicate with the woman at all? Did she ever find you, or vice versa?
No, she didn't. So I don't know if she was. I don't know what to think about that. I don't know if she was a tourist. I don't know if she was foreign. I don't know what happened to her, but she ran out of the station screaming. I mean, she got clobbered a couple of times, so she took off, and then she never filed a report against him or anything. But there was that other woman who he attacked like just a few minutes before I got to the train station.
Wow.
So, but if it wasn't for me, I mean, if he hadn't carved me up, he'd still probably be out. You know what I mean? Like he would have gotten a slap on the wrist at the best. So, he's this is a dangerous guy. I mean, clearly he just kind of snapped that night, you know.
Right.
If he had really no criminal history at all, and then suddenly out of nowhere he's just fucking going nuts and trying to rip people's clothes off, and you know he's got a blade on him, like he just kind of totally snapped. So in a way, I think it's a good thing that he did what he did to me, so that he would get locked up for at least for a little while.
Right. Wow. Well, good for you. And you should learn some fighting skills. Learn the jab. You can't just throw your haymaker. You gotta jab a few times to measure the distance, and then you can kind of get a feel for where he's at and create some distance, and then you reel him in with that jab, and then you come across with the big one.
Yeah, the ball kick. That's what I replay the most in my head. I'm just like, oh my God, I kicked him in the balls. What a fucking bitch move, you know?
Well, you got to do what you got to do to survive. But it's amazing because I think everyone puts them in that scenario of what they would do. Would they take action? So you did it. So you can live your whole life knowing that you took action in that situation. So
now I never have to do it again. I see women getting attacked all the time now, and I was like,
yeah, you did your piece. Well, man, it was great to see you and catch up. I really enjoyed it. Maybe we'll do it again because I'm sure there's a lot more we could dive into. We didn't even get into your mom passing away, really, which I would have loved to have done a deep dive.
I mean, I feel like we didn't get into that or the Jehovah's Witness stuff either. But I guess that's for another time.
We got to do a part 2. Maybe we'll do another one. Let's do another one soon, man. Thanks a lot. Plug some stuff. Tell everybody where they can find you and all that good stuff.
Well, I was laughing the other day because I was listening to your episode with Carmen Legala, and you were like, plug your podcast. She was like, I don't have a podcast. You're like, are you fucking kidding me? The only time I've had a podcast? And I was like, right here. Me neither.
Why don't you and Matt do a podcast?
I don't know. We had something in the works like a year ago, and then something came out that was like the same thing that we had thought of. So like, all right, that's dead in the water. But we definitely should. So yeah, I memean, I guess now just follow me on Instagram, Who Doug Smith. Check out my YouTube channel, Doug Smith Comedy. I got a bunch of that web series that I was talking about is on there, and a bunch of other stand-up clips and other shit is on there. Hopefully I'll get my head out of my ass and get a pod going soon.
Yeah, it's pretty easy. I mean, this was it. We just did one.
Yeah, right. But man, my hats are off to you, man. I don't want to sound like I'm slurping you off too much, but you have been like a content making machine since quarantine started, and it's really cool to see.
Oh, thanks.
Impressive.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's hard because it's like there's not much stand-up. I'm trying not to do much because everyone's like, the best thing you can do for society is to stay home, and I'm like a lazy person, so I'm like, great.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm a lot of podcasts and trying to do some sketch shit now. So I don't want to go back to my old life. I'm like kind of enjoying being home and talking to people via Zoom. It's nice.
Yeah, right. I know. I feel like I felt like I was starting to get a little bit burned out on stand-up when it happened. So I'm looking forward to getting back, but I feel like it was a welcome break too. But yeah, man, it's cool. It's cool that it has not slowed you down at all. It's cool to see, and I applaud you for it.
I appreciate it
because I get in my own way all the time. You know what I mean? Like I'll part of the anxiety is I'll think of something like, nobody's gonna like that. That's stupid. Why would you do that? You know? And, you can't do that. You got to get out of your own way.
Yeah, but that's what I was just listening to a podcast about. Like, that's what procrastination is. It's fear of failure. So you should check out the 10% Happier podcast. There's great conversations on there. They're doing a whole thing about self-compassion in January. I recommend it to everybody. Dan Harris's podcast, 10% Happier. Okay. And use that app. Go use that app. Fucking do some meditating,
I got that
dog.
Fucking $100 thing just sitting there.
Yeah, do it. All right, man. Thanks so much. This was great. Yeah. This is one of my favorite episodes ever, so I appreciate it.
Oh shit. Thanks, man. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, always a pleasure.
Mindful Metal Jacket is hosted by comedian Joe List. Produced by Joe List. Edited by Matt Kleinschmidt. Executive producers Robert Kelly and Matt Kleinschmidt for the Laugh Button Podcasts.